Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for coming out for 45 minutes or so of talk about Pirates of the Caribbean. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping to catch up on. Somebody asked me a question after we had been to Grenada, and if you've been to these talks, you know that wasn't one that I talked about this time, but the captain told us and Mike told us that we couldn't wear camouflage out. It was against the law, and somebody asked me why. And if that gentleman is here, here's the answer I found. It's not very satisfactory, but here's the answer I found. Three things. One, it is against the law. It's not something you look up on Snopes and it's an urban language, an urban legend. It is against the law. There are two thoughts as to why. And I can't pin it down any more than this. One is, you remember back in 1985 when a leftist overthrow of the government occurred, and there were some folks that were held captive in a hospital down along the shore, and Ronald Reagan sent over troops to rescue them. One thought is that relating back to that and the warlike atmosphere is something they don't want to have any part of, and camouflage is associated with the military, and that's one possible reason. The other possible reason I found, and I asked a number of folks in the crew and people who were off a lot more than I and exploring in these places, the thing that makes the most sense is if I, as a civilian, wear camouflage, it could be viewed as disrespecting the military. And they're proud of, and they want to continue the pride in those who serve them. And so they reserve that only for the military. Now, that's not definitive. If you quote me, you're taking a guess. But that's what I was able to find out, and I hope that helps the gentleman who asked me that question. Well, if you are directed, as you are this afternoon, to think about pirates, what comes to your mind? If you're as old as I am, probably Errol Flynn and Captain Blood will come before Johnny Depp and the Pirates of the Caribbean series. But these two images are very strong in our thinking about pirates, particularly Pirates of the Caribbean. The brave buccaneers swing on ropes over the narrowing gap between two ships and arrive on decks with a menacing thump of high boots. Steel clangs on steel, pistols split flame and bullets. Sailors howl defiance, bodies fall, beautiful women cower before bloodthirsty villains. Then casks of spirits are broken open, and rum-soaked ruffians stagger about, bedecked with stolen jewels and finery, committing unthinkable atrocities on the passengers and the crew of the captured ships. Well, if that's your image of pirates, and it's mine, we probably got it from this guy. Robert Louis Stevenson was not the first person to write a series of stories about pirates. But his book, Treasure Island, set the stage for what we think about pirates and piracy today. His descriptions, his storyline, has pretty much been taken up by the rest of us. And about 30 years later, another writer by the name of J.M. Barrie wrote a book that we don't think so much in the Errol Flynn, Johnny Depp series, but Peter Pan and Wendy, which is just a little over 100 years old now and still is read and enjoyed. And of course, you know, Walt Disney picked it up. And Barrie modeled his villain, Captain Hook, after Blackbeard, Edward Teach. even down to the point of that particular pose from that particular scene. More about Blackbeard tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to do famous pirates, famous and not so famous pirates, and other pirate stuff. And a couple of times today I'll say more about that tomorrow as an enticement for you to come back tomorrow. Well, not even first ladies are immune from thoughts and enjoyments of pirates. When Jackie Onassis was Jacqueline Bouvier, in her room, she had a huge pirate flag on the wall. She collected souvenirs and so forth. And one story is told from 1965 after Jack had been killed. She had a party in Newport for John, and Caroline and their friends, and they buried treasure on the sand, and they got a pirate ship to sail up Narragansett Bay. Secret Service men were dressed as pirates. She even got one of them to walk the plank in the spirit of things. And this is the point in the talk when David typically gets in trouble, because he suggests folks he'd like to walk the plank. Politicians, sports figures, politicians, church members, politicians. You make your own list. We've got one more day at sea. I don't want the captain to put me off. But pirates and piracy have become a clever marketing tool. You'll recognize this guy whether you use the product or not. There's a little captain in all of us. Captain Morgan, more about him tomorrow. Seagram's has used him to great success. Really an icon to advertise their brand. But let me pop up here 3 more pirates who used to be in advertising. And if you don't recognize them or say, I don't remember them, you're in pretty good company. First of all, Captain Crook. Now, Captain Crook used to hang out with Ronald McDonald. And there was Mayor McCheese, and there was Hamburglar, and there was Evil Grimace. And his name was politically correcticized to just Grimace, but they've all disappeared now, and Captain Crook has gone out on the high seas someplace and is no longer found in McDonald's. You may stop from time to time at Long John Silver's great little seafood shop. I challenge you to remember the last time you saw Long John Silver at his seafood shop. He's disappeared from the menu, from the signage. And they like Kentucky Fried Chicken. They don't even call it that anymore. It's KFC. Now it's LJS instead of Long John Silver's. And Captain Crunch used to battle Jean Lafoot on the box of Captain Crunch's Cinnamon Crunch. But the only place you can find Jean Lafoot anymore is on eBay. He's disappeared completely from the advertising realm. Maybe they'll make a comeback sometime. Well, in olden days, the first time that the United States Congress formed a peacetime navy was when they built the U.S.S. Constitution and several others in that class to battle the Barbary pirates. The Barbary pirates, you remember from history, came out of Tunisia and Algeria, part of the old Ottoman Empire, and they attacked everybody's ships. They were an equal opportunity ship seizer. The way you got out of being attacked by the Barbary pirates was you paid a ransom, a subscription, if you will, so that they wouldn't seize your ships. And the United States, while we were a colony of Great Britain, were protected by the money Great Britain paid. When we won our independence, we were on our own. And we were too poor a nation in those early days after the Revolution to be able to pay them off. And so they seized ships, they kidnapped sailors. At one point, there were 100 Americans in captivity, in slavery to the Barbary pirates. And finally, the government got busy we got some ships, we got some sailors, we got some victory, and were able to defeat them. It was about 40 or 50 years after the nation was founded, but pirates have affected us in a lot of ways, going back to our first peacetime Navy. Now, incidentally, if you're from Boston, Charleston, or New England, your city got a big start from piracy. The pirates would come in, they would sell their goods to the local merchants. The local merchants would put a little markup on it and became quite successful. New York was founded largely because of the proceeds of pirates back in the very early days. And if you're from South Carolina, the Cooper River is right here, and Charleston at the harbor. A great part of Charleston's history also comes from pirates. These folks get out here, they get the goods, they bring them in, stuff you can't get anywhere else at prices you can't get anywhere else. And being good merchants, they were successful at it. As long as people have been putting together boats, whether it's just lashing reeds together or making wooden ships or whatever it was, there have been pirates. The psalmist says that some went down to sea in ships doing business on great waters. And although he's not talking specifically about pirates and piracy, you can go clear back to these days when there were pirates and piracy. And I like the way that he writes it. The Lord commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea, and they mounted up to heaven and went down to the depths. And you can see the rocking back and forth of the winds. But there have been pirates and piracy as long as folks have been tootling around on the ocean. Now, to quote the bard from Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 2, that which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. What's in a name? Does it really matter what you call these folks? First of all, a pirate. Now, if you are in the business of sailing ships and stopping other people's ships and taking stuff off of their ships, it matters to you what you're called. Because if you're a pirate, you're a crook, you're a criminal, you're a seagoing thief. Pure and simple. You stop any ship belonging to any nation or company, take their goods and carry it off as your own. And everybody's against you. You are subject to being captured and tried and executed by anybody. Now, if you're a privateer, you're still a pirate, but you've been hired by your government to attack other ships, ships of the competition. More about that in a minute. If you're a pirate and you have been hired by your government and you attack other ships, you cannot be tried by your government as a pirate, as a thief. So it's a whole lot better name. Now, a buccaneer, this name has come into the language, and although the buccaneers did stop Spanish ships, they hated Spanish ships. They began as Englishmen and Frenchmen who lived on Hispaniola, the island that's today Haiti and the Dominican Republic. They hunted, they tanned leather, they had a whole community there, and the buildings, the little huts that they prepared their tanning in were called boucans. And they were buccaneers, or as it's become down to us, buccaneers. Technically, not pirates, although they did stop any Spanish ship that got in the area. And the fourth one is swashbuckler, and this started out as a description in the 1600s of land-based villains. If you were a robber on land, horseback and a sword, you were technically a swashbuckler. Now, some writer got a hold of the term. It actually predates Robert Louis Stevenson, and called seagoing criminals swashbucklers. The name is stuck, and writers and screenwriters use the terminology today. But from the beginning, there have been pirates and piracy. Call them what you will, it makes a difference in some cases. The golden age of piracy, and we'll spend some time here tomorrow, goes from roughly 1690 to 1725. You can debate that first date. I've seen it, 1688, 1692. I just rounded it off in the middle to save an argument. But the 1725 date, I'll tell you tomorrow why the golden age of piracy ended then. But if you look at ancient peoples and you look at the artwork, you look at the pottery, you look at the carvings on the walls and whatnot, from the Minoans to the Egyptians, there are stories told of ships that are attacked and goods are taken off and people are captured. One of the oldest is this Phoenician historical relief. The Phoenicians were, the first folks really to get going at sea. And as soon as they started moving their goods, and they sailed close to the shore, but it was easier to go by ship than it was over land, people started attacking their ships. They hired the Greeks to protect their ships. When Rome was in charge, the Pax Romana ruled the world as well as ruled the sea, and until Rome disintegrated, there basically was no piracy because Rome kept the seas free, at least the Mediterranean area where Rome was the power. Now, for about 300 years, there are no pirates, there are no piracy, even after the disintegration of the Roman Empire. But on June 8th, 793, in Lindisfarne, England, Vikings came and raided a monastery there. You see in the cutout, the little red spot, that's Lindisfarne on the British Isles, a close-up of it. There was a Catholic monastery there that had the most wealth of any similar facility on the island. And the pirates found out about it and raided it. And before word could go out from Lindisfarne, all the monks were dead, all the gold and other precious items were stolen, and for the next 300 years, the Vikings dominate the water, and pirates under Vikings control the waters. Now, you're familiar with the geography of the area, Norway, Finland, the Scandinavian countries, how they're all those little inlets and whatnot. They're great shipbuilders. They have a place where you have to be. And the design of their ship is such that it doesn't draft very deep. So they can go into rivers and places where other vessels can't. There's records of Viking pirates attacking Paris, sailing up the river there. Their ships were adorned on the front with a carving. The carving was their god, which protected them while they were sailing. When they went home, they took the god down. They stored it on the ship so they wouldn't offend the local deities back home. But fierce, excellent sailors, and off they went. Well, I've mentioned the golden age of piracy. Let me tell you how it got started. Two basic reasons that the golden age of piracy happened. First, we're going to blame Henry III. Henry III was at war against France and Spain a lot. And anytime there's a war, you have to raise taxes to get material, to hire troops, and then you have to raise taxes to get material and hire troops. And pretty soon the English treasury is about bankrupt, and the people are taxed to the point there's nothing else to give. Henry comes up with a great idea. It's called a letter of marque. Marque is from the French word which means to seize. Originally, it's a document that's given to somebody who is owed money. If you owe me money, I'm given a letter of marque, which means I can come and take your stuff to pay your bill, and there's nothing you can do about it. Henry seizes on the idea, and he hires pirates. Here's the privateer. They have a letter of marque. This is an actual one from 1688. It's a French letter of marque. After Henry was successful with it, got ships, got sailors, took on the Spanish and the French. The French and the Spanish come out with their own. This is an actual letter. He was able to raise a navy, and the deal is you attack any French ship you want. You attack any Spanish ship you want. And you take half, and I take half. And once this system gets going, of course, there are always folks who are going to work against the system, and it leads eventually to one of the two reasons for the golden age of piracy. This is not an actual letter. It's a reproduction. Well, it's not a reproduction. It's a creation by a history student who got it as close as is possible, including the words, all such merchandise, money, goods, and wares as shall be found on board. You can have it. You've got this document. You've got the seal. You've got the signature. You can have it. Somebody else came up with another alleged letter of marque for Blackbeard and Elizabeth I. Good trick. Trouble is they were about 7 decades apart. Be careful when you're forging stuff. Also be careful when you're doing research. I told you the other day about finding a swimsuit company called Arawak. When I was looking for these pictures, the first time I looked for pictures to show you, I typed in letter of marque. Got the ones you're looking at. Wasn't terribly satisfied with what I found, went back and typed in letters of marque. And I found a company that makes ladies' garments that would cause her to be able to seize the heart of any person she wanted to. Letters of marque. Be careful, researchers, what you find, what you come up with. Well, the second reason for the golden age of piracy is the discovery of the New World. And let's blame for this one Christopher Columbus. This is Chris before he met Isabella, 1476. He is sailing from home to England. When he gets off the coast of Portugal, his ship is attacked by pirates. He swims ashore and goes and stays with his brother. His brother's a cartographer. He begins to study the maps. He becomes convinced there's a way to the west by sailing east. He can't convince anybody in Italy of that, but he convinces Isabella. And they work out a deal. Now, Columbus is a pretty fair negotiator. He probably could have done better, but after all, he gets 3 ships, and he gets 10% of whatever he finds. He also requests and is granted the rank of admiral, governor, and viceroy of any place he finds. And he wants an hereditary peerage for his family for the lands that he finds. Isabella says, that's not a bad deal. Here you got 3 ships. Have at it. Into the world or treasure. It's all up to you. And so they set sail on August 3rd, 1492. On October 12th, they spot San Salvador. Not too long after that, they land on La Isla Hispaniola, and they meet, much to the demise of the Arawak people, the Arawak people. I've told you this story before. It's the same story. The Arawaks are doomed when the Europeans come. They can't fight off our diseases. In return, they give us a few diseases. It's called the Columbian Exchange. But Columbus sees them dressed in finery, decked out in gold, and he takes some samples, including some of the folk, chained below deck, back home to Spain. Once he gets back, Isabella says, this ain't a bad deal. And within a short period of time, Spain controls all of this area, the Spanish Main. takes in Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, Central America, and the northern part of South America, including over on the Pacific side. Well, they're successful. There's treasure over there, and the Spanish come up with a whole class of vessel called the galleon that they use to transport all the gold back to the old world. Here's a representative of the Spanish galleon, 135 feet long, 35 feet at the beam. You see our vessel, 915 feet long, 105 feet at the beam. We're almost as wide as they were long. You talk about bravery, sailing those little ships across that big ocean, and full of treasure. Now, this is some actual Aztec treasure that was looted. Here is some treasure from a shipwreck from a Spanish galleon that was recovered, pearls and gold and so forth. The first armada of treasure ships that sailed were 3 vessels in number under the direction of Captain Avila. They're weighted down. They're wallowing in the ocean. They can't make time. They can't navigate and change course quickly. And Jean Fleury, a Frenchman with 6 ships, finds them near the Azores and attacks. He splits them apart. One ship escapes. He captures the other 2 ships, takes the treasure, and back to France it goes. Incredible amount of wealth on this first voyage of treasure. This is a partial inventory. Underline the word partial. 680 pounds of pearls. 500 pounds of gold dust. 150,000 gold ducats. 3 cases of gold ingots. 5 cases of silver ingots. Feathered cloaks. Chests of jewels. And other odds and ends. Gold mask figurines, exotic birds, and animals. Partial list. Let's look at one item, the gold dust. The 500 pounds of gold dust at today's market, $14 billion. No wonder there were pirates. We get a couple of things from pirates that's kind of interesting. One is a very early form of democracy comes from pirates. Now, they're swinging back and forth, the boots, the guns, the paragraph I read to you at the beginning. But most ships, before they sailed, came up with articles under which the ship operated. They would debate them, they would discuss them, they would write them down, they would agree to them, sign their name or make their mark, and swear to abide by them on a battle axe or a Bible. Captain John Gow and his ship, the Revenge, had a pretty representative list of articles under which they sailed, and it was about a 10-item list. I just picked out 3 for illustrative purposes. If you try to run away or if you keep a secret from the company, you get the worst penalty possible to a pirate. You're marooned. Tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Smokers, you'd better have a cap on your pipe if you're down in the hold where the powder is. If you're carrying a lantern, you better not have an open candle. It better be in a lantern or you're marooned. And with all the bloodthirsty thoughts that we have about pirates, and most of them are true, the last one says, if at any time we meet with a prudent woman, that man that offers to meddle with her without her consent shall suffer present death. There was a certain respect, at least on the Revenge, for ladies. Now, not only a form of democracy, they voted on this. There's another vote. I'll tell you about that in a minute. They also had the first form of workman's comp. If you lost a right arm, you got 600 pieces of 8. Left arm 500, right leg 500, left leg 400, and 100 for an eye or a finger. Evidently most of them were right-handed because you didn't get as much for a left leg and a left arm. But if you were thus wounded, you were compensated. Incidentally, if you were thus wounded, they wouldn't put you off the ship. They'd let you stay on board. You were typically made a cook. And we'll talk about some recipes after a bit. But here's a sailor, here's a pirate who's been marooned. It's probably nothing more than a sandbar that at low tide you can reach. They've been nice to him. They've let him keep his clothes. A lot of times they put them ashore naked so the sun would attack them faster. And they would get a weapon, typically a pistol, and enough ammunition for one shot. And you're going to die. There was one man, at least, who asked to be marooned. His name was Alexander Selkirk. He was sailing on a ship called the Cinque Port, the Five Ports, with the fellow to our right, William Dampier, as master of the privateer vessel. Selkirk looks around and he says, "Boys, I don't think this thing's going to make the next port. Would you put me off?" And they put him off in the Pacific on an island called Masatera, which means closer to land. It wasn't that close because he's on the island for over 4 years. And he gets a rifle and he gets powder and he gets some shells and clothes and an axe and a Bible. And almost as soon as the rowboat's away going back to the ship, he has a change of mind, but they either don't see him or they ignore him. And he's on the island, marooned. He domesticates wild cats so they'll attack the rats. He builds houses, he grows crops, he makes clothes. And 4 years and 4 months later, Captain Woodes Rogers of the Duke shows up with William Dampier as first mate, not captain, because Dampier's ship, the Cinque Port, has sunk. And most people that were on board died. Selkirk made a wise choice. Woodes Rogers writes down the story. He puts it in his log. He gets back home. He gives an interview to a newspaper man. It's published. And Selkirk is invited by a writer by the name of Daniel Defoe to the Bristol Brewery to talk about his adventures. And he talks to Defoe about his adventures. And the next year, the life and strange, surprising adventures of Robinson Crusoe hits the market. Now, back in Selkirk's hometown, they put up a statue in his memory. Look at the illustration from the first edition of Robinson Crusoe and look at the statue of Selkirk. You see any similarities? Daniel Defoe was a good researcher, and he fictionalized Selkirk's story, made a fortune out of it. Selkirk made nothing. Well, perhaps you want to join a pirate crew. Let's talk a little bit about what's involved there. More about that tomorrow when we talk about specific people on board. You know, it's not just anybody who wants to fly, who wants to live under the black flag. Why would you join a pirate crew? Well, we've already seen one inducement, the wealth. And everybody on board, whether he's the cook who's not able to battle or whatever, gets a part of the loot. To see the world, our Navy has used that as an inducement. To prove their manhood or womanhood, because there were female pirates. Altogether now, more about that tomorrow. To escape criminal prosecution. Get on board a pirate ship. or maybe get yourself into criminal prosecution, and to extract revenge on your enemies. All reasons that folks went to sea as pirates. Now, pirates, and we're concentrating on the Caribbean, the Atlantic, along the coast of North America. Pirates came from all of these nations. Welsh, English, Irish, Scots. You can read the list, including indigenous North Americans and South Sea Islanders. All were pirates in the area where we're sailing. The Irish put a lot of pirates out. We'll talk more about those as we close this talk out. But a great producer of pirates, very successful pirates. One of the most famous pirates of all time came from Puerto Rico. Thank you. Number 21, playing right field, Roberto Clemente. While you're chuckling, while I've got you in the mood, what's a pirate's favorite letter? Thank you. Pirates had their ears pierced. How much did it cost? A buccaneer. Now this guy, thank you. Stick to lecturing, David. You'll never make it on the comedy stage. Now this guy, he's had it bad. And he meets a friend of his who asks, buddy, whatever happened to you? He said, well, I went up on deck for my first fight. And before I could do a thing, a cannonball blew my leg off. The doctor sewed me up, fitted me with a wooden leg, and in the next battle, I had my hand cut off. He patched me up. I'm learning to fight left-handed because now I've got a hook. And his friend said, what happened to your eye? He said, well, I was out on deck. I was practicing left-handed swordsmanship, and a bird flew over and pooped in my eye. And his buddy said, well, that would have hurt and been uncomfortable, but it wouldn't have taken your eye out. He said, no, it was my first day with a hook. That's it. That's all I subject you to. There are three people on board the ship who are the most important of the crew. First is the captain. And you see from a film, I don't know this film, but a captain on top of a pile of loot. This is how you get to be captain. This is the key to success. To paraphrase Nature Boy Ric Flair, to be the captain, you have to pass a democratic vote. Here's the other election I was telling you about. Now, there are a lot of pirates who have their own ships. It's my ship, I'm the captain, you don't like it, you get off. There are other instances where a captain is killed or all kinds of things can happen, and they actually put it to a vote who's going to be the captain. And whoever gets the most votes is the captain. You have to find treasure and keep the crew alive. If you're going to be the captain, you have to be an excellent battle tactician to get number 2 working. You receive the largest share of the booty, of course. But you can be voted out. Now, if the ship is within 10 minutes of a battle, your position as captain is secure. They're not going to stop and take a vote with the enemy just 10 minutes away. But after that, you could be voted out. Now, it's hard to get good crew. Captain Blood was a doctor, you remember. And when pirates would catch a ship and they'd line up the passengers and they'd go through and they would ask them, what do you do? What's your job? A couple of jobs they're looking for. If you don't volunteer to come and be a pirate, they'll volunteer you. Of course, if you were shanghaied, if you were volunteered, if you were forced to be a pirate, you can use that in your defense if you're captured. But one of the jobs that was vital was the navigator. Perhaps next to the captain himself is the navigator, because he can do directions, he can write, he can do mathematics, he can draw maps, he can get you there and back again. And he was aided by this device called the backstaff that was invented in 1595 by a gentleman named John Dowie. Before they would take a sextant and look at the sun and do the calculations, with this device, the sun would be over your shoulder, so it was much easier to use, much more accurate, but the navigator was vital on the ship. And secondly was the surgeon. This is the surgeon's number one tool on the ship. Most wounds were cured, and I say that cautiously, by amputation. If you couldn't find the surgeon, you found the ship's carpenter, because they both knew how to use the saw. Now, as awful as that sounds, in 1715, a man by the name of John Woodall wrote a book called The Surgeon's Mate that was not only on pirate ships, but it was on naval ships as well. And he collected information on medicines, actual medicines, folk medicines, remedies, plants, and designed a medical chest that was on board lots and lots of ships, including the pirate ship, and also implements used by the surgeon. Now, none of these looks like fun, and the ones in the middle on the blue are dental tools. I don't know about you, but if I've got a toothache on board that ship, I'm going to have a toothache. But you can see some of the other things, and most pirates died from disease or from the results of wounds that the surgeon couldn't cure, more than were killed outright in battle. Well, eventually you're going to go ashore. And when a pirate goes ashore, there's three things that he wants. He wants to eat something that tastes nothing like what he's been eating on board ship. Because by the time of the end of the voyage, the fresh stuff is gone. And what's in the pot are leftovers of leftovers of leftovers and whatever else you can find to throw in the pot. So he wants a meal that tastes nothing like anything he's had before. He wants to get so drunk that he can't tell the difference between the floor and the ceiling. And he wants to have companionship of an imprudent woman. And also, when he gets ashore, well, let's stop a minute. Hot victuals and insect-free bread. When you get a piece of bread on board a pirate ship, look at it. There's probably going to be holes in it. Pick it up and shake it. If it rattles, there's a creature inside. Turn it over so the holes are down. Shake it out. If the creature that falls out, the little worm or whatever falls out, is got some color to him, a little bit of life moving around, there's still some nutrition in the bread. If he's gray and just lays there, you might as well forget it. There's no nutrition left in the bread. But hot victuals, insect-free bread, and a smoke. Now you can smoke. You're not subject to death for smoking. And this collection of pipes was found in Jamaica. You went to your favorite pub. You had your pipes there. You had a collection of them because the clay bowls would get too hot, and you could only smoke one bowl of tobacco, and then you had to get another one. If you didn't have pipes, you could rent pipes. And once you had finished with a pipe, they'd give you a new one. Once you gave the pipes back, the owner would cut the stem off, sell it as a new one to the next guy. And, of course, have the friendship and companionship of a woman. Now, once you've done all of this, the food, the booze, the companionship, your pockets are empty. And you're going to have to go back out to fill them up again. And speaking of pockets, in the 14th century in France, they passed some laws that were called sumptuary laws. Here's what's happening. The ordinary folk want to dress like the big deals. They want to look like the cardinal. They want to look like the judge. They want to look like the mayor. And so they start dressing in the costumes that the officials wear. Well, the big deals don't want the ordinary people to look like them, so they pass sumptuary laws that says unless you're a judge, you can't wear a judge's costume. If you're caught wearing a judge's costume, you go to jail or worse. What do pirates care about that? So one of the greatest treasures that they can take off of a captured ship are fancy clothes. And they wanted those almost as much as they wanted the gold and the silver, because when you get to town and you're duded up like this, it marks you as being successful. And the folks whose attention you want to attract are going to be attracted to these colorful costumes. They'd wear ordinary clothes on board ship, but when they docked and got to town, they'd drag out the finery and they would flaunt it, and into town they'd go. Two more things and we're done for today. One is the earring. Most pirates wore earrings, and you've been asking yourself, why did pirates wear earrings? Well, I'm going to tell you. One thought is it improved your eyesight. There's an acupuncture point in the earlobe that affects eyesight. And if you had your ear pierced, you could see better. I know lots of folks with pierced ears that wear glasses, so maybe that doesn't work. Another thought was it was a cure for seasickness. Seasickness can be brought on by a motion imbalance, and if you put a blob of gold on one side, it'll help to steady you. You're not buying this either. Portable wealth. You can leave your American Express card at home because you've got a blob of gold in your ear. And it's also good to pay for funeral expenses. You can tell your buddies, if I die, here's some earring gold, bury me, if you could trust them. Folks, here's the real reason. Fashionable. For pirates and for folks today, they're fashionable. That's why they wore earrings. Now, one final pirate. I told you earlier that a lot of pirates came from Ireland. Some of the most successful, some of the fiercest were Irish pirates. When you go back to Barbados, talk to some folks. There were a couple of important pirates on Barbados who were from Ireland. One was nicknamed Redleg. The last two pirates, final pirates I'm going to tell you about, one is an Irish captain who had a crewmate who was from Poland. And they were under attack by marauders from the north. These northern attackers were incredibly successful. Almost no one could stand in their way. And this Irish captain, named Danny Murtaugh, sent out Bill Mazeroski, and with one swing of the bat sent the Yankees back to New York losers and the Pittsburgh Pirates winners of the 1960 World Series. Thank you. Jason Bourne won't be here for 40 minutes. Do you have any questions? If you don't want to holler them out, I'll be here for a while afterwards.